Fallout 4 is getting a multiplayer mod, which is something I'd covered almost 2 full years ago here on the channel during the last episode of Upcoming Mods, the series where we would cover the latest and greatest active mod projects in development by mod authors. And yeah, it really has been that long since the last episode in this series. That said, Fallout 4 multiplayer was one of the projects you all seemed most interested in on the channel, and a number of you have been requesting that I give an update on it for quite some time. So I figured we would go ahead and start things back up where we left off with this series, as we actually got a large progress update for one of the Fallout 4 multiplayer mods that we discussed in that video. So let's talk about that. So for those of you with a good memory and that have been around on the channel for quite some time, you might remember that in my previous video, I discussed not one, but actually 2 Fallout 4 multiplayer mods in development. One from Hyunsen Go, known as Fallout 4 Multiplayer, or F4MP for short, and another that was just a baby sprout at the time, that being Fallout Together by the Skyrim Together team. At the time of that video, it seemed like the project from Hyunsen Go was the most promising, and for good reason, as he had plenty to show off for the mod and seemed quite interested in the project. Fallout Together, on the other hand, was more so just announced and only really files for the community to access and mess around with. It wasn't much of an actual project at the time. In fact, the Fallout 4 multiplayer mod by Hyunsen Go was really the primary focus of that video and why I made it in the first place, including all of the multiplayer gameplay shown off, where we covered his showcases for synced player animations, appearance and equipment, decent PvE combat, PvP combat, object sync, fully fledged settlement building, and most impressive at the time, NPC and dialogue sync. What made this all even more exciting is that he was saying it could all be feature complete and released by the end of 2020. That alone had a lot of people, including myself, very excited. Unfortunately, since that video, things didn't go so well for that specific mod, as Hyunsen Go left the project, and while they tried to keep the project together, things rapidly fell apart, and the project was officially declared dead on April 18th, 2021. So that brings us to the second Fallout 4 multiplayer mod, the one we didn't have a lot to go off of at the time of that video. That being Fallout Together, which has since been in development by the Skyrim Together team. It's no longer just files for people to mess around with, and for those of you that don't know, Skyrim Together is the Skyrim multiplayer mod that has been released and played by a number of people for years. And this team has been giving updates every few months with major development on both Skyrim Together Reborn, which is a rewrite of the original Skyrim Together mod, and Fallout Together, their Fallout 4 multiplayer mod, which is directly affected by the development and release timeline of Skyrim Together Reborn. The 2 projects are making progress at nearly the same pace and have received a number of exciting updates ever since my video. In fact, between the time of that video and the latest progress update, which we're going to be covering here in this video, they had given us 2 major updates. First of which being in November, where they addressed the Skyrim Anniversary Edition and what it meant for the Skyrim Together mod. For the old Skyrim Together, also referred to as the Harbor Edition, it has been long discontinued and will not be updated. It is still available for download, but it hasn't been updated for over 2 years, so your experience will vary. Then they brought up Skyrim Together Reborn, which is the rewrite of the Skyrim Together mod, which had seen a lot of progress in 2021 and will also support the Skyrim Anniversary Edition. Their major update at that time for Skyrim Together Reborn and Fallout 4 Together was that projectile sync had been implemented for both, as well as spells and magic effects, which they even gave us a small preview on. They had also implemented a new launcher and began working on their UI and in-game HUD. But a big thing that they were looking into was making questing as smooth as possible, which I think is one of the most important elements of this experience, as that's the whole idea of playing Skyrim and Fallout 4 together with friends. That then brings us to their first developer update on December 3rd, 2021, where they had plenty more to show off, including magic projectile sync, Fusro DOS sync, object animation sync, and arrow sync, which had received general improvements since the previous update. The 2 notable updates for Fallout 4 Together was the projectile sync being improved and that they had reverse engineered Fallout 4's magic classes, all of which is positive news for the development of Fallout Together. And that leads us to their latest developer update, which was earlier last month on March 11th, which we're going to cover in more detail as they had a lot more to say this time around, and the progress over the last 3 months is quite impressive. So starting off with their statement on the development and release changes for Fallout Together. Firstly, we have decided to release Fallout Together after Skyrim Together Reborn. The plan was originally to develop them at the same time and release them on the same date, but due to the small size of our team, this is proving to be more challenging than we thought. Therefore, we will finish Skyrim Together Reborn first and release Fallout Together after that. Currently, Fallout Together is not too far behind Skyrim Together Reborn, but it does still need some work. So Fallout Together has seen some major changes over the last 2 years alongside Skyrim Together Reborn, which is in its final development phase according to the mod team. Secondly, we're happy to announce that most of our major planned core gameplay features are in. This means that we will be spending our time polishing the mod, fixing bugs, fixing crashes, tweaking gameplay elements where necessary, and building the launcher and in-game UI. With that, we are officially in the last phase of development before we can release 1.0. As always, keep in mind that this does not mean that we have an estimated release date in mind. Now, I do want to note that a lack of release date is no worry. It's typical for larger mod projects like this, which I'm sure you've come to expect. But with this news, we could be seeing a release for Skyrim Together Reborn as soon as this year, with Fallout Together coming not too long after it. Of course, that is my only estimation based on their progress updates, so don't hold them to that. But nonetheless, this is very exciting news when compared to 2 years ago, when we had little to nothing in regards to a release, and the unfortunate news of Yamashi taking an indefinite break from the projects, which they announced back in November 2020. Thankfully, the project has still been in the works, and there's more to this progress update, which will affect both Skyrim and Fallout 4. First off is their update on stability. Since most of our core features are done, our internal testing team has been hard at work testing the mods for bugs and crashes, and we've been fixing them accordingly. We're happy to report that this process is going well, and that stability is rapidly improving. So the stability for both Skyrim Together Reborn and Fallout Together is being worked on, which is a vital part of making this actually playable beyond just adding the multiplayer mechanics, and this is the final phase of development before 1.0 releases for Skyrim Together Reborn. So we're getting closer and closer to a release every passing day. They also gave us an update on magic effects, which more applies to Skyrim Together, but some of this will translate over to mechanics for Fallout 4. We mentioned that we had synchronized magic effects. After testing the system, we noticed that it had some problems and certain effects didn't sync. We have made some major improvements in that regard. Most magic effects are now synchronized between players. One example is the slow time shout. Healing other players through spells also works now. We could be seeing this translate to mechanics in Fallout 4, such as VATS, but a mechanic like that, we might also see them translate to real time, much like Fallout 76. Menus are now unpaused natively in the mod. Whenever you open a chest, open your quest journal, open your magic selection menu, the game will not be paused anymore, akin to the Skyrim Souls mod. I'd say this is a pretty important aspect of multiplayer, is not pausing every time you open up menus. As for the inventory system, it has also seen some major changes. We have completely revamped our old inventory system. With this new system, the server will have a lot more control over individual players' inventories, what enchantments they have, whether they are upgraded, etc. All of these smaller improvements are huge steps to turning this into a well-rounded experience for both games. But I would say one of the most exciting bits about this progress update is their statement about their ES parser. This is a more technical issue, but this might be exciting for modders. We have developed an in-house ESM, ESP, ESL parser that can load core and mod files onto the server. We plan to add a server-side scripting API in a post-release feature update. The game records can be exposed to the API, and the sky will be the limit on what modders can do with that. Now, while I obviously can't elaborate on what exactly modders will be able to accomplish with this addition, I can indeed say that any improvements to the modding capabilities is phenomenal news in my book. While I would still love to play these games vanilla in multiplayer, as vanilla as a multiplayer mod can be, the further modding capabilities will unlock a whole new world for how you can play with others. And that is awesome. As for full compatibility with script extenders and mods that use them, that is another question left unanswered for now. We've seen New Vegas multiplayer add support for NVSE, so we'll have to wait and see if it's feasible for these two projects to do the same. What's even better is that's not it for Fallout multiplayer mods, as I will have a very exciting video coming soon for the New Vegas multiplayer mod, which if you want an idea of what that experience looked like before it got shut down, revived, and heavily updated, be sure to check out the video on screen. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, this is Apoqsi, signing off.